Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the third Thursday webinar series brought to you by the Oregon Conservation Partnership. I'm Shawn Morford, and I'm the Executive Director of the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, and I'm going to be the moderator for the session today. Those of you who have been on these webinars before know the drill, but for those of you who haven't, I'll just give you a few housekeeping things before I introduce Matt to us. Everybody is muted by default, but we absolutely want to interact with you as much as we can on this. So there's a couple of different ways that you can intersect here. One is during the presentation, if you want to raise your little icon hand, I'll be watching for those hands, and you can, I'll just unmute you and you can ask your question. The other way to interact is to type your question or comment in the question box, and I will be watching for those as well. So we have been doing these webinars once a month for, I don't know, a year and a half now. They're really popular among watershed councils, land trusts, and conservation districts, but I also see that there are some other partners have signed up for today, so I want to welcome everybody to participate in these. We do record them, and they are archived on the Network of Oregon Watershed Council's website. I'm going to be sending you all a survey at the end. Typically, the GoToWebinar software will send it out for me, but I forgot to set it up this morning. So I'll be sending it to you in an email just to get a couple of words of feedback. Our funders always want to know what difference these sessions make to you, so please take a moment. Your comments are like gold to us. They translate into dollars to enable us to put these on. So, and another reminder, just to let you know, if you have an idea for a webinar topic, or if you have something that you would like to show and tell to your colleagues, this is the forum for them. We can do them on the third Thursday, but if you have an idea for a webinar at another time, they're easy to set up, and we're happy to have this forum available to the folks that we serve. So I'm going to introduce to you, since we have very little time this morning, to introduce Matt Shelby, who's the manager of public information for the Oregon Lottery, and I told him I thought he had the best public information job in the state because he gets to tell all the stories about all the great stuff happening as a result of the lottery dollars. So, and he didn't disagree. So, Matt gave this presentation in a longer format at the Connect conference in April, and we've been trying to pull out some of the most favored and popular sessions that happened at the Connect conference and put them on as webinars. So I asked Matt if he would do that. He was one of the ones that came out strong in terms of the feedback. Really simple concept, but really, really important for us to tell our story and let funders and our stakeholders know what we're doing. So Matt has some techniques he's going to share with us, and we'll be together until 10:30. And if you have any questions, Matt will undoubtedly give you some contact information afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Matt.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So I'm just going to get down to it because we don't have a ton of time. But really, the point of this morning is really to talk about core message development and delivery. And my goal really is to talk to you all a little bit about my process and what I go through to develop a core message. I've kind of developed this process starting in Portland Public Schools into my work in state government and on here to Oregon Lottery. So, you know, it really kind of transcends policy area. And it's really just about taking sometimes complex topics and concepts and really distilling them down into, you know, really a couple of sentences that make sense to people. A little about me, currently the Public Information Manager at the Oregon Lottery. I kind of fell into communications. I started out in program management, more at the nonprofit level. But like I'm sure a lot of you know, when you work in a nonprofit or a small municipality, in a program, you end up doing a lot of your own communications because you don't have communications people. So that's kind of how I landed here. And again, today I'm going to share some of my insights and some of my tips. So creating a core message is something that I am asked to do almost on a daily basis. We have a lot of subject matter experts here at the lottery, and really any place else I've been, and people that are very close to their work. They're very good at what they do. They know a lot, but sometimes they have a hard time teasing out the kind of most important stuff when they want to communicate to people that maybe aren't experts in their field. And that's where this can really help, I think. So again, why is it important? You've got lots of different messengers potentially in an agency or in a program, and you want to speak with the same voice. People don't have a lot of time, and so you can't really give somebody a 20-page white paper and expect them to read it and understand why your program is important. You've got to get their attention really right out of the gate. You got about 10 seconds. Why should I care? And what it really allows you to do is focus on the information everybody gets. So it's kind of like the scoop of ice cream that everybody gets. People are going to put different toppings on it. So, and by that I mean the core message is the piece of information that regardless of who you're talking to, they're going to get that nugget of information. Now, depending on your stakeholder, you might actually provide additional information depending on what they may need to or want to hear. But at the end of the day, everybody's going to get that core message. So now I'm going to walk you through a little bit about, walk you through my process for how I do this. And again, I do this at Lottery. I've done it in other state agencies, in school districts, in park districts, and it really kind of is the same process. I really think about, because I'm a visual person, kind of an hourglass. And so I sit down either, hopefully not by myself, with other people. Actually, it's more fun that way. And if whatever the topic is, let's brainstorm all the relevant facts. What are all the potential things that a person could know or need to know about whatever the project is that I'm working on. And at this point, just imagine a whiteboard, sticky notes, something like that, just writing stuff down. What are all the potential things that people may need to know? Once we get that all down on the board or down on paper, we start to kind of see which facts or which ideas really kind of fit together, and see if we can kind of create some groupings with them that just naturally come out. This is kind of a fun exercise with lots of people because it actually there's some opportunity for debate. I think this goes here. No, I think it's more of this. This is redundant. And so, really start to kind of do those groupings, those pairings. In general, people kind of like 3. And so I try to, if I can, distill things down into 3 key buckets of information. Those buckets are going to lead to really 3 key points or themes. And as you think about it visually, that's the winnowing down. It's the top half of the hourglass, right? It's you start with everything at the top. Now you're distilling it down into these 3 key points. Ultimately, you take those points and put it in a sentence or 2. So again, verbs are great. Active verbs, industry jargon should be avoided if you can. And then we write it down, say it out loud. Depending on where you're going to be, how you're going to use it, it may really help to have that key point. If you've got 10 seconds either in front of a camera or talking to a reporter on the phone, or even just a board member that says, tell me about this project. If you've practiced that, it's going to be a lot easier to come off. Once you have that, actually, you can then dress it back up on the bottom half of that hourglass. So if you go back to all those kind of relevant facts that were all random, and you've sorted them into those groups, and now you've narrowed those groups down to your key message, you still have all those relevant facts that maybe you didn't include in your key message, but depending on your audience, you might add those. And so whether we're talking to a reporter or somebody who's wants to make sure that we're spending someone else's money wisely, or whatever whoever the stakeholder is, you can then have a conversation, a proactive conversation about, besides this key message, what other of those relevant facts do we need to include when we're talking to X stakeholder. And so then it really allows you to tailor your message for different audiences, but at the same time, there's a consistency because every one of those messages is going to get that core message. So I've got a lottery example. We're asked to do this on a fairly regular basis, and I'm going to show you something that's going to be a little bit scary, but I'm sure you've seen stuff like this before. There you go. Explain this. This is lottery's new governance process that we're establishing internal to the lottery. And we have a bunch of project managers and research and evaluation folks that love charts, love flow charts. This is about 200 words or so on a single slide, and it's frankly kind of terrifying. So how do you explain this to someone? I couldn't just hand this piece of paper to somebody and say, hey, here's our governance process. I think if someone handed this to me and just kind of walked away, or as a takeaway, I'm not sure I'd spend the time to try to figure it out on my own. And so what I really need to do is try to capture their attention. The detail's good, but you've got to get the attention first, and that's really where a core message comes in. So how do I take this and really distill it down into a couple of lines that make somebody, they kind of put the frame around this, so that when we get down to this level of detail, whoever I'm talking to has an understanding around why this is important and what are we really trying to accomplish with this. So again, back to that process of the hourglass, I'd sit down and brainstorm all of the relevant, what are the takeaways from this document? And going through it, we've got things like executive staff make the strategic decisions. It's a transparent process. It's an established and consistent process. Some of the benefits of it are better tracking of resources. All projects are going to be vetted through the same criteria. We're going to be accountable for results, define starts and stops. Those are just, it doesn't even have to be a full sentence. Just what are the ideas that are popping out that are really kind of the main takeaways as you look at that first document? And that's really the first step. Just get it down on paper. Next thing we do is we start to group them into common themes. And again, 3's nice. You may have more depending on how complex the topic is. And what I've done here on this whiteboard is I've gone through and just color coded, what ideas or concepts seem to kind of fit together. So I've got the executive staff make strategic decisions. It's collaborative, better tracking of resources. Left hand knows what the right hand's doing. Better cross-departmental work. Those are all, to me, they kind of fit together. The transparency, the established process, all projects vetted with the same criteria. In the green, that's kind of another one. And then the final one is really kind of focusing more on results with the built-in reporting, accountability, and defined starts and stops. And once I have that, I've got my 3 groups. I've got to kind of roll those up. So what's a few words that I can use to describe the group? And so what I landed on, the blue to me represent clear roles and responsibilities. The green represented consistent and transparent process flow and decision criteria. And then the black is kind of the, why are we doing this? Well, more informed decisions, less wasted effort, better outcomes. Now I've got this thing down to 3 key ideas. And then the last thing I do is represent those ideas in a single couple of sentences. So finally, I've boiled this all the way down to what you see there. Governance, it formalizes how we evaluate, prioritize, resource, and track work efforts lottery-wide. It allows, and I need to close this. allows us to know how a project in one area impacts another, leads to better decision making at all levels of the organization. So, and essentially, really, it's about knowing how to get things done faster and more effectively. So if I start with that, I think most people can kind of wrap their head around, okay, I see what you're trying to do. And then we can kind of build that back out into more detail depending on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to somebody on our executive team, I might focus on how the fact that this governance process doesn't actually take away executive staff's ability to make a strategic decision, but what it does do is empowers other people in the organization to have more inputs on the front end. But again, I'm always going back to this core message to really put the whole thing in perspective. And you could do this for any kind of policy area. Once we've got a core message down, that's great, but you still have to deliver it. And one of the things that I kind of had to deal with pretty early on in my career was delivering those core messages to media, to the news media. I was in a park and rec district running after school programs, and we didn't have a communications person really. And so I had to promote my summer programs. If there was an issue at one of the school programs, I had to kind of talk about that. And so I've had a fair amount of experience in a number of markets here in Oregon doing that. And the next few slides are just some of the things I've learned to kind of help us through getting that core message delivered. And, reporters aren't people. And I was kind of laughing when I say that, but they're really not. I mean, they are people, obviously, but they have a job to do. And reporters are more, it's better to consider them more as a microphone or a megaphone in some cases. Common just human social interaction, there are some kind of cues that are polite, repeating the words back that someone says to you, that type of thing. And it's a different beast when you're dealing with a reporter. One of the things that I see constantly is that people will often give up control of their environment. When I was at Portland Public Schools one time, we used to be an all or nothing school closure district. And when you've got schools that are above 500 feet and schools that are about zero or sea level, you've got lots of different discrepancies on a snow day. And we closed the district because our upper elevation schools were snowed in. But down at the district headquarters, it was sunny and the pavement was dry. So of course, TV news media wanted to come talk to us about that decision. I came out of the district office because typically I like to do interviews standing up. That's just the way I'm more comfortable. But the sun was in my face, and it was a bad kind of visual that I'm talking about being closed for a school day or a snow day when I'm squinting because the sun's in my eyes and I'm standing on dry pavement. So I actually asked, hey, can we go inside? And let's do this in the lobby. And they actually said, okay, that's okay, we can do that. But I think a lot of people don't necessarily think to ask. And if you're more comfortable standing giving an interview, just say it. If you're more comfortable sitting down behind your desk, that's okay too. Whatever you're going to be more comfortable with, try to kind of maintain that control. I mentioned about the repeating of words in normal polite conversation. But it's different when you're talking to a reporter. Unless they're really trying to go after you, the viewer, the audience, or the reader rarely gets to hear the question. They only hear your answer. And so if a reporter asks you a question that is peppered with negative language, you really don't want to repeat those negative words because now all of a sudden that's going to be your quote. That's what they'll use. And so, it's really about listening, hearing the question, but then kind of, again, maintaining control of that environment, owning your response, and really focusing on what you want to share. And then lastly, just be aware of your body language. You want to be leaning in, smiling. If you talk with your hands, that's fine. But just, be aware of kind of how that looks on camera, and if you're wailing your arms too much, But again, try to be as kind of calm and conversational as you can. Again, it depends on the situation a little bit. If you're promoting something that's great, obviously you're going to be more upbeat. If you're talking about your agency's response to something negative that's happened, obviously a little more subdued. So just be aware of that body language and how it really comes off, because you can say the same words, but if you say them in a different tone, it's going to have a different meaning. When you're talking with reporters, again, this comes back to how the audience rarely hears the question. So don't fear dead air. If you have been asked a question, you've answered it and stopped, and the reporter doesn't immediately start talking again, that's okay. Again, this comes back to a polite conversation. We want to fill that dead air when we're talking with people. It's kind of awkward. But again, that's a technique that reporters will use to kind of keep people talking and potentially get them down a rabbit hole. So if you felt like you've answered a question sufficiently, just stop, make eye contact, smile on your face, or if you're on the phone, it's okay to have just dead air time. It's not your job to fill that space. I've spent, I think my record is 60 seconds on the phone in dead silence. I was timing it with a reporter. I had answered the question. They didn't necessarily like my answer, and it was then just silent for 60 seconds. It was kind of a surreal experience. Always have a pivot. When you go into an interview with a reporter, have that. And this kind of ties back to the core message. What do you want to talk about? What's the core message that that you want to convey? Reporters anytime you have an interaction with a reporter, it's an opportunity to push whatever message you want to push, even if you didn't ask for that that interaction. You know, the reporter could call you out of the blue, but what do you want to talk about? And have that in your back pocket. So in terms of answering the questions that get asked, sure, answer the question, but try to do so in a way that allows you to get back to what you want to talk about. I mean, typically we don't get as much leeway as the politicians on the Sunday morning shows that just totally ignore questions oftentimes, but most times we can get back to what we want to talk about, and then really focus on what you know and don't speculate. So if you're being asked about things that you honestly don't know the answers to, it's okay to say you don't know. Oftentimes people get in trouble when they try to either kind of come up with an answer on the fly or speculate, and then oftentimes they end up having to walk that back because it wasn't just right. You know, it's okay it's perfectly acceptable to say, you know what, I don't have that at my fingertips, but if you give me a few minutes, I can get that for you. Or, you know, I hadn't considered it that way. Let me touch base with my folks here, and we can get you an answer on that. That's totally fine. And frankly, I think most people, for most people, it would be the preferred answer if you don't have one. And then finally, always close by repeating that core message that you have. Just about every interaction anybody has with a reporter, the last question they ask is, hey, is there anything else I didn't ask you? Is there anything else you want to say? And most often, or oftentimes, people just want to get through that interview. They just want to get done, and they say, no, I'm good. We covered everything, just so they can get off the phone or get off the camera. And it's really a missed opportunity, because the more you repeat that core message, the more concise it's going to get, and the better the delivery is going to be. So think about it. If you've ever broken a bone, you've had a cast on. The first time someone asks, hey, how'd you break your ankle? Oh, I was skiing up at Whistler for spring break, and we went down this run, and it's a 10-minute story about how you broke your ankle. The next person that comes along, that story is going to get shorter. By the fifth person in the office, I broke my ankle skiing. You just naturally distilled it down to the most important pieces. So, and you're going to do that naturally just talking with the reporter. So take that opportunity, because oftentimes that's going to be the best delivered message. and it's going to be the talking point or the clip that they use. The other thing about it is that if you're recording an interview, either on the radio or on TV, it's the last thing that's on the tape. And so when the news crew gets back to the office, or they're in their news truck trying to splice something together, and they're starting from the end, having to rewind it back, it's the most accessible and oftentimes the best delivered nugget, and that's the one that gets used. So just lastly, I've got a few minutes left. Want to talk about just kind of an evolving media landscape. When I started, 15 years ago, we were still faxing news releases to newsrooms. It's come a long way since then. It used to be everyone was so worried about the Oregonian editorial board. We got to get the ed board on our side because they had kind of a monopoly on that. That's not the case anymore. Citizen interest blogs sometimes are more influential as editorial boards. So really, finding out who those influencers are in your communities, oftentimes that time is better spent than trying to pitch an ed board. We've seen this. A single tweet can generate a whole news story, whether it's at a national level or a local. Citizen journalists, they're out there, and we just have to be mindful of that. Print media, it used to be that print media was print media, and TV news was TV news, and radio news was radio news. But kind of everybody's writing for the web, and they're always striving to be first, and everybody's kind of multimedia these days. And so when you're actually reaching out to any media source, having that the ability to give good visuals or good audio is another positive thing that's going to increase your chances of getting some good coverage. And then finally, digital rules. Reporters have more direct access to the public. If you're trying to get good positive coverage for your agency, you should be on Twitter, not necessarily tweeting a lot, but just to see what the reporters are talking about, because the reporters are there. They're talking directly to their readers, their viewers, their listeners via Twitter, sharing their own stories. And so if you can engage with reporters directly on Twitter, that's another venue, and kind of an interesting one. Talk about transparency. Having an interaction with a reporter via Twitter in a public space is kind of an interesting one. I kind of touched on this, but everyone's publishing immediately via the web. It's kind of like I want to be first and not necessarily right. And so there's oftentimes we are reaching out proactively or reactively to news organizations that don't have it just quite right because they were in a hurry to get it up on their website. The nice thing about that is it's not in print yet. They can change it quickly. Deadlines are now. It used to be one of the pieces of information that you were supposed to ask a reporter is, what's your deadline? If you ask them that now, they kind of laugh at you because the deadline's now. Everyone's they're not waiting for a Wednesday publication. And by the time they do get to that Wednesday publication or the 6 o'clock news, it's a compilation of stories that have already been online for hours or days. And so it's really, how do you get out in front of that stuff? And newsrooms do have fewer, they're shrinking, but at the same time, their opportunities for engagement are increasing via Twitter and their websites. And finally, editors are endangered species. When we engage with reporters directly, oftentimes they're writing their own stuff and putting it straight to the web without anybody else seeing it. So it actually makes it even more important when you know that a story is coming out about your agency to kind of go through it, and not just for content, but just for edit, almost help them be their editor. I reached out lots of times to reporters saying, hey, saw your story about us. This thing wasn't quite right. Can you update it, please? Here's the right information, and they're happy to do it. And now I've talked all the way till 10:30. Editorial calendars, real quickly, and I'll send this deck out so folks have it. But really, the purpose of an editorial calendar is just so you can get your you can plan your communications that you want to have ahead of time. And what that does is it allows you to respond to the stuff that you don't know about. So if there are seasonal things with your agency, put them down on paper. If it's, when we were at Portland Public, or I was at Portland Public, I always knew when back to school was. I always knew when state assessments came out. And so we could plan for those communications ahead of time so that as the craziness popped up, we still had that stuff in the hopper. It allowed us to tell the stories we wanted to tell. It allowed us to identify who the best messengers for any point in time were. And it allowed us to kind of organize that on the front end. So again, you do all that so that it gives you more capacity to respond to the unknowns. And I'm 1 minute over, and I'm done. So I've got a couple minutes here, and I can take questions if people have them, and I'll just stop there.
Great, Matt. Wow. That was jam-packed with really good stuff, especially for those of us who have been around for a while.
I threw really a lot at you.
What's that?
I threw a lot at you.
Yeah. Okay, well, wait, I'll just be watching in case there's any questions. You brought back some memories for me. I was, one point, this is Sean, by the way. One point in my career, I was information officer on the gypsy moth spray project in Lane County.
Okay.
That was the mid 80s. And, we were on TV almost every day for about 8 weeks. And I found that reporters sometimes don't know the topic very well, so they're asking questions kind of willy-nilly or based on their best knowledge of the topic, and they don't mean to throw you off or to ask you pointed or hard questions. They're just trying to get you to talk about the topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally figured out after quite a long time that I could answer the question that I wanted to answer and not necessarily their question, because sometimes it was off base. It was like, what? Where did that come from? Whether it was negative or not. But
yeah, and that's unless they're really trying to stick it to you, you rarely hear the question, or the audience rarely hears the question. And so, kind of knowing that going into it, I think it really helps, because you're right. It does. Thinking about it in those terms, what do I want to talk about on this topic? And being prepared with that is really going to help you then communicate what you actually want to communicate, and not answer sometimes an uninformed question.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to make your ask to folks on the call about contacting you?
Oh yeah. So this is an interesting gig for me here at the lottery, because for the first time in my career, I've been in an organization that actually brings money in to the government, as opposed to trying to scrap for money to fund programs. And one of the things that we've really been doing in the last 6 months or so is focusing on the programs that lottery dollars fund. And we have access to some of the big bucket numbers, X billions of dollars for education, or X hundreds of millions for watershed enhancement. But what I find, those numbers are so large, they often lose some of their meaning. And so what we're constantly trying to find and look for and communicate are those more local stories about a bridge that was redone with lottery dollars, or a creek that was restored with lottery dollars, with help from lottery dollars, and really trying to communicate those out, not only to the media, but also our players. We're rolling out a lottery app this summer that is really primarily a convenience app, so that folks can check their tickets to see if they won. And if they won, their phone's going to vibrate, and they're going to get a little celebration on their phone. If they didn't win, they're going to get a message saying, thank you for playing. Because of players like you, X thing happened, and it's geo-targeted for their
Awesome.
for their location. And so we've pre-populated that with information that we already have, but we want to keep that, we're never done there. And so the more kind of local stories that we have, I think the better it's going to be. And so if folks have stories about projects or things that were funded with lottery dollars, send them our way, and we'll help promote that and promote your organization along the way.
Great. Matt, we do have one question that came in. We're going to ask folks if they'll stay on for just another minute so they can hear the answer. the question is, any hints on promoting a community event?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we found with community events is trying to get just about every community has a local paper or local media. So instead of trying to get the Oregonian or Willamette Week or somebody some of the bigger papers on board, maybe hit up the Pamplin papers or the whatever the local paper is there. Oftentimes they are struggling to fill, they're looking for content. And so if you can even write a story or an article, offer to cover your event and provide them with the copy, lots of times you'll get a byline in their newspaper. The other thing that we do is we promote a lot of our local stuff via social media, just Facebook and Instagram. You don't need a whole social marketing team to kind of do some of that outreach. And then I think finally, kind of piggybacking on other community, whether they're events or venues, as a way to kind of promote some of that. So, like for example, we just had State Parks Day, or Oregon just had State Parks Day last month, and it's a free day, all state parks. So there's a lot of interest there, and we piggybacked with Oregon Department of Parks and Rec to host events at some of the state parks, various parks around the state. And we did the traditional, put out a press release, but then we also worked with the local papers in the East Oregonian or wherever we were, to make sure that they knew that there was something, State Parks Day was happening, but there was really something special happening at these parks, and that seemed to work. We got some good coverage out of that. Anything else?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was saying thanks, Matt, and I was wondering how people can get in touch with you.
So I didn't have it on the deck here. That's my apologies. But if you're still on, it's just Matthew with 2 T's .Shelby SHELBY at state.or.us, and I'll send this deck out. And when I do that, maybe I'll add my address too there, so folks have it, and phone number.
Great, and we'll post your PowerPoint on the website along with the recording. So once again, Matt,
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. I'm sure that folks got a lot out of hearing what you had to share.
Hey, happy to help. You guys have a good week.
Yeah, you too. We're going to end now. Bye for now.